The atmospheric mixture inside the testing deck carried the distinct, unpleasant bite of ionized gas. The high-gravity proving ring dropped into total stillness, a heavy iron vault that smelled of hot oil and scorched copper. 10 elite recruits from the greatest warrior lineages lay paralyzed across the thick floor plates. Their massive limbs twitched under the heavy air. No warnings, no alerts, no alarms. In the center of the room stood an unarmored human cadet. Her gray jumpsleeve was entirely unwrinkled. She was calm, cold, and completely focused on her hand as she pressed the rear button of a heavy brass drafting stylus. What our network recorded in the dome that day. I wish I could say the threat ended inside that room. Jump backward exactly 24 minutes before the heavy iron gates locked. Monitor Scribe Vex 4 stabilized the barometric array from the elevated control deck, tracking the vital signs of the incoming training class. The system had run for 40 generations without a single mechanical error. 10 of the candidates possessed heavy biological structures that exceeded the interstellar combat baseline by half. The 11th candidate was a mammal made of soft tissue. She had no visible armor, no biological venom channels, and no sharp tracking crests. Her name was Cadet Jacqueline Ward. The massive industrial compressors inside Pressure Dome 19 Sigma began their long, deep roar. The heavy pumps forced the local atmosphere up to 4.1 standard pressures, while the gravity coils spiked the weight of the room to 2.4 times the galactic norm. The thick air turned warm and thick, pressing down like a wet blanket. My luminescent respiratory seals shifted from a deep cerulean to a slow, pale green as my systems adjusted to the sudden load. It was a standard endurance test designed to weed out species with soft bones. The rule of the testing deck was absolute. Those without heavy subdermal plating were pushed away from the primary respiration vents. The legacy recruits immediately moved into a tight, defensive wall around the central air pipe. 4 members of the Obsidian Vanguard used their 300-kilogram bulk to claim the center. 3 Krellian sentries shifted their dense subdermal fibers to block the outer ring, while 3 serpentine siphon weavers coiled their fluid muscle groups across the floor. They took everything. They claimed the air, they claimed the space, and they left nothing for the newcomer. Cadet Ward did not try to fight them for the central valve. She simply walked to the far corner of the dome, pulled an iron equipment box near the wall, and sat down. She reached into her sleeve and produced her brass drafting stylus. The tiny, mechanical snap of the brass barrel registered at a mere fraction of a decibel against the multi-ton roar of the industrial compressors. Click, snap, click. It was a small, useless tool meant for drawing mine paths on paper, yet she held it with a steady grip that did not shake under the heavy gravity. "Your atmosphere is leaking 4% to the northwest," Ward said, her voice crackling over the intercom line. She did not look at the heavy warriors watching her. "It makes the air taste like burnt tin." Up in the observation gallery, Commander Galt's eyes let out a low hiss from his respiratory crests. To the iron-bound phalanx, a vocal complaint about comfort was the first sign of an asset ready to break. My diagnostic screen showed Ward's heart rate resting at 72 cycles per minute. She was completely unbothered by the pressure that was already making the Krellian sentries widen their stance to balance their weight. The countdown clock on the central pillar hit 0, and the official training cycle began. The 10 elite recruits did not wait for the environmental stress to do its work. They had watched the humans sit down as if the academy floor was a porch on a mining colony, and their collective pride had soured. They turned as one unit. The largest Obsidian Vanguard candidate stepped forward, his segmented plates clicking against the iron deck as he led the group in a tight flanking configuration. The massive creature reached out with a heavy manipulator, intending to seize her shoulder and drop her to the floor before the first environmental blast hit. Ward did not retreat. She did not raise her arms to block the strike. She simply altered her center of gravity by a handful of centimeters, utilizing the heavy room to swing her body under the reaching arm. The Vanguard candidate's 300-kilogram mass had nothing to strike. His own forward velocity, doubled by the heavy pull of the dome, carried him headfirst into the reinforced structural wall. The impact was a dull, metallic boom that shook the viewing glass. My terminal flared a bright amber. The system was not recording an active strike from the human. It was tracking a sudden, catastrophic balance failure in a premium asset. 2 Krellian sentries lunged forward to pin her legs with their heavy lower limbs. Ward stepped directly into the narrow gap between their shoulders, moving with a fast, low-energy economy of motion. She did not use a fist. She brought the sharp metal tip of her brass drafting stylus down into the soft hinge joints of their knee casings. She struck, she twisted, she pulled. The 2 giant warriors dropped instantly to their knees, their thick subdermal fibers locking up as their nerve clusters short-circuited under the precise mechanical pressure. They groaned, their heavy bodies rolling onto the iron plates. My respiratory seals flared an irregular, bright crimson as I leaned over the console. The internal sensors were updating at a frantic 0.12-second rate, and none of the numbers made sense. The 3 serpentine siphon weavers saw their peers fall and immediately began to coil across the deck, trying to create a 700-kilogram compression ring around her position. They were built to crush light hulls in the deep seas. Before their muscular loops could close, Ward stopped. She calmly checked the alignment of her left jump-sleeve cuff, smoothed a small crease near the seam, and waited until the lead serpent's lateral line came within reach. She did not struggle against the loop. She used the serpent's own shifting weight as a lever, stepping over the rising coil and driving the heavy metal cap of her stylus straight into the exposed neural node behind the creature's sensory crest. The serpent went completely rigid. Its massive coils unraveled like loose rope, striking the 2 remaining weavers and dragging them down into a tangled, heavy heap. They advanced, they lunged, they fell. The entire engagement had taken exactly 42 seconds. The diagnostic board on my desk flashed 10 sequential alerts, anomalous motor paralysis. 10 legacy lineages were offline, disabled by their own momentum and the calculated choices of a creature that weighed less than a single Vanguard limb. The high-gravity testing ring went completely silent as the heavy breathing of the fallen recruits echoed through the vents. In the center of the dome stood Ward, her posture relaxed and her skin entirely dry. She calmly pressed the top mechanism of her brass stylus twice, extending a fresh fraction of graphite lead. She methodically jotted down a structural note in her worn paper ledger, her handwriting neat, and even under the 2-point for G load. Gravity calibration is slightly biased to the left, Ward muttered toward the ceiling microphone, her flat tone carrying through the quiet deck. Fix that. Up in the high gallery, Commander Galt's eyes did not scream. He did not call for guards. He simply stared at the telemetry screen where the human's threat index was currently rewriting itself from a negligible digit to an unranked anomaly. The screen did not show an act of war. It showed a complete institutional breakdown. Before the cycle ended, the High Qualification Council acted with cold, silent bureaucratic speed. Directive 102 Omicron was officially appended to the Academy's master database before the next class was called. The new regulation stated that under no circumstances were human assets to be integrated into multi-species physical dominance exercises without a dedicated kinetic dampening blanket active in the room. The human species was formally updated from a standard tier to a Class 1 environmental catalyst. The Empire did not admit a defeat. It merely changed its laws to survive the presence of something it could not quantify. 3 full quarters later, I found myself walking through the secure historical deep vault of Facility 84 during the low-light shifts. The long stone corridor was entirely empty, cooled to a crisp chill that kept the database stacks from overheating. No sound from the vents, no movement from the floor, no signs of life. I stopped before display case 47, where the simple brass drafting tool sat locked behind 3 layers of reinforced glass. The pale stasis light caught the deep scuffs along its metal barrel, casting a thin, dark shadow across the small velvet cushion. The official metadata plaque below it labeled the item as a prime psychological force multiplier. I stood there for a long time, watching my respiratory seals pulse a dim, uncertain violet in the reflection of the glass. Ward had been reassigned to a heavy infrastructure fleet on the rim months ago, yet her shadow still hung over every training deck in the quadrant. I watched the fragile, unplatted humans arriving at our borders now, and I no longer see recruits. I see a species that looks at an engineered death world and quietly complains about the quality of the ventilation. Somewhere out in the dark sectors, their mining crews are resetting the pressure valves on worlds we left wild for 10,000 years. I am trying very hard not to think about what happens when they finish. A single drop of condensation ran down the outside of the glass,